If you've been scrolling through endless telescope listings, trying to picture yourself under a clear night sky while the best model glitters on the screen, you know how overwhelming the decision can feel. You've probably asked yourself, do I really need a 12-inch Dobsonian if I'm just starting out? And what happens if I pick something that's too bulky to actually bring to my backyard? This review is meant to cut through the noise, give you a realistic picture of what you'll actually experience with the Skywatcher Flextube 300 Dobsonian, and help you decide whether it's the right fit for your stargazing routine. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the most immediate impression you get when you unpack the Flextube 300 is how it tries to balance size and portability. A 12-inch primary mirror is traditionally the domain of permanent setup observatories or heavy, fixed-mount scopes. Skywatcher tackles that by engineering a collapsible tube that folds down to a size you can comfortably load into a mid-size car trunk. In practice, that means you can drive to a dark sky site, set it up on a simple tripod, and have a respectable aperture without needing a trailer. For anyone who lives in a suburban area and has to travel a bit to escape city lights, that convenience is the biggest selling point. The telescope arrives fully assembled, which is a relief compared to some kits that leave you with a dozen screws and a vague instruction manual. The proprietary tension control handles let you tighten or loosen the tube sections with a single motion, so you're not wrestling with bolts every time you collapse it. I tested the Collapsible expand cycle 3 times in one night, each time the tube locked back into place with a firm, repeatable click. That consistency is essential when you're in the middle of a session and need to pack up quickly because of changing weather. Now, let's talk optics. The mirrors are quoted at 94% reflectivity, which translates to a noticeable brightness gain over many entry-level Dobsonians that sit in the high 80s. In real terms, that extra reflectivity shows up when you're hunting for faint globular clusters like M13 or tracing the delicate arms of the Andromeda galaxy. The image feels a touch sharper, and the contrast is enough that you can start discerning individual stars in dense regions without needing a high-power eyepiece. For a beginner, that immediate visual payoff can be the difference between losing interest or getting hooked. However, there are practical trade-offs to keep in mind. The collapsible design, while convenient, introduces a small amount of flex in the tube when you're at the highest magnifications. I pushed the setup to 200mm focal length eyepieces and noticed a slight wobble that required occasional readjustment of the focus knob. If you plan to do serious planetary work, you might find that a solid, non-collapsible Newtonian will give you a steadier platform. The Flextube 300 shines most when you're looking at deep sky objects at lower powers, where the tube flex is less noticeable. Another point that often trips up first-time owners is the weight distribution. The telescope's body is built from a mix of lightweight aluminum and steel needle bearings for smooth altitude movement. The bearings themselves feel smooth, and the altitude axis glides without the gritty feel you sometimes get on cheaper Dobsonians. Yet, because the tube collapses, the center of gravity shifts when you lower or raise the tube. When the tube is fully extended, the scope sits a little higher on the tripod, and you may need to tighten the tripod legs to keep the whole setup stable on windy nights. This isn't a deal breaker, but it's something to be aware of if you're setting up in exposed locations. Who should consider buying this telescope? If you're a beginner who wants a serious aperture without committing to a permanent installation, the Flextube 300 hits a sweet spot. It's also a solid choice for families who want a shared instrument that can be packed away after a weekend outing. The fact that it arrives complete means you don't have to hunt for extra parts or spend extra money on a separate mount. Moreover, the large 12-inch mirror gives you a clear advantage over the 8-inch models that dominate many entry-level catalogs. You'll notice more detail in nebulae and galaxies right out of the box. On the other hand, if you're an urban dweller with only a balcony and no intention of traveling to dark sites, the size and weight of the Dobsonian may feel excessive. You might be better served by a more compact refractor or a tabletop Dobsonian that fits on a small table. Also, if your primary interest is planetary observation and you need a rock-solid, vibration-free platform for high-magnification work, you could look at fixed-tube Newtonians that lock the tube in place and eliminate the flex entirely. One of the subtle strengths of the Flextube 300 lies in its steel needle bearings. These aren't just a marketing buzzword. They provide a buttery smooth motion that lets you track an object across the sky without jerky jumps. During a test session, I spent several minutes sweeping from